regardless of how long you were wrongfully convicted. When you're in a situation, especially being on death row, where your life is constantly being played with, you're always living with the constant reality of somebody trying to kill you.
And that was when I realized, like, it doesn't really matter whether you've served 1 day or 40 years.
Doing okay?
Time is time. You still have time taken from your life.
They can do this to any of us. It doesn't matter who you are, what color you are. Ultimately, they can do it to anybody that they want to.
When I started in 1997, I thought, oh, we'll work on it for 5 years, and then we'll get all the innocent people out of prison, and I'll move on to something else.
Our system currently doesn't operate the way that it says it does on paper.
The reality is that the legal system changes so very slowly. Some of the things that we knew needed to be reformed in the 90s still have not been accomplished.
It's incredibly frustrating because our work is to work on fixing problems that never should have occurred in the first place.
Washington Innocence Project was originally founded in 1997 under the name Innocence Project Northwest. The organization was the second Innocence Project in the United States. We're affiliated with the Innocence Network, but this is not a franchise. It's more an affiliation of organizations that support one another in various ways, but we're entirely financially independent of other innocence projects around the world.
We transitioned into the Washington Innocence Project just a couple of years ago, changing our name to reflect that we work exclusively within Washington State.
We're launching in that way during a global pandemic. And so all of the books that have been written don't apply in terms of how we move forward. So the best thing that we can do is to continue to talk about the work that we're doing and ask those who support us to do the same.
Wrongful convictions happen a lot of the time because there's a stigma. Say you have a past and somebody doesn't have to be true. They just have to say, well, this person kind of looks like that person.
So when we talk about reforms, when we talk about how do wrongful convictions happen, well, sometimes they happen because people don't do their jobs in the way that they know that they're supposed to be doing their jobs.
Humans are human, and we pretend like the criminal justice system isn't as human as we are and isn't capable of making mistakes. And it is, because it's just people making decisions.
Sometimes we'll fabricate evidence to get a wrongful conviction. It doesn't matter. Just as long as they're getting a conviction for a crime, they don't care. It's not them it affects, and it's not their families it affects.
Or the culture in that office has been such that the constitutional protections that are guaranteed to anyone under our system are not actually being provided.
I don't know that it's necessarily foolish to believe that we're innocent until proven guilty, but the reality is that isn't true, and we see that when we are doing the investigation, that oftentimes the police or the person who was investigating the case is looking for all the evidence to prove that this person did it, but that's not the way to do it.
When the police stormed in and they cuffed me up and took me next door to City Hall, and all of a sudden, I'm getting questioned for the rape. I didn't even know a rape had occurred. They decided to do the physical lineup, and I thought, God, about time. I'm gonna get out of this, they leave me alone. She ended up pointing me out.
So mistaken eyewitness identification.
When you're in highly stressful events, while the event itself will be seared into your mind, your memory is not going to encode the person's identity and pay attention to those types of details, so your memory actually becomes unreliable with respect to an identification.
They locked me up and said, I'm getting locked up for rape, sodomy, and kidnapping. And I said, I ain't kidnapped nobody, ain't nobody inside of nobody. I've been home with a bullet in my foot, but they still locked me up.
False confessions.
This system, it needs to be changed. It needs to be looked at by outsiders. When you go to trial, the system is against you already because they're shining what is criminal on you.
Ineffective assistance of counsel.
False testimony by someone given an incentive.
Most of the time, they are also a combination of those factors that end up leading to someone being in prison for a crime they did not commit.
In order for our system to evolve to the point that we no longer have wrongful convictions, there would first have to be some recognition of the limitations of human judgment.
Race impacts our clients, economics impacts our clients, the class issues involved in who's going to jail, who isn't going to jail, and why.
The legal justice system is built on people's ideas of justice, white men's ideas of justice. And until we deal with that, we will be here over and over and over and over again.
I feel like from its inception, it's been an oppressive tool used against Black communities and other communities of colors. I think it's working how it was meant to work.
There are convictions happening right now that we will be working on in a couple of years after those appeals are exhausted. The really frustrating part is that there seems to be an understanding that wrongful convictions happen, but when it comes to reform, there's a real resistance to change the way that things have been done. Every one of the thousands of cases of wrongful conviction was a case in which that prosecutor and that law enforcement officer were 100% sure that they had the right person. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been, hopefully, going after that prosecution.
I just wish the world could pull back some of those layers and socially constructed ideas and binary ideas about people being good and people being bad, because it's much more complex than that.
Growing up, I just assumed that the only people who went to prison were bad people. And there was a clear dividing line between good people and bad people. And what prison really revealed to me was that the situation is way more complicated.
And then we have a judicial system that is primarily fueled by guilty pleas, because that's the only way that the system could continue to exist.
If there happens to be a witness who conveniently, by being incarcerated in the same cell with someone, says, hey, give me a deal in my case and I'll tell you about everything this person just confessed to. It's easy to believe it because we have confirmation bias. We look for the things that are going to confirm what we already believe to be true, and we dismiss the things that are contrary to that.
This coronavirus lockdown has been good and bad. I told my mom the other day that this was like a bigger prison cell. I was like, this is nothing. I was like, I made it all them years in that little cell. I was like, I can definitely do this. She laughed about it, but yeah, I definitely have more experience than most as far as being patient and being stuck at home or in a certain place for a while.
Of course, just like everyone else in this day and age, we are working remotely, all of us trying to manage.
Things just kind of came to a halt in March in terms of the ability to be able to go out and investigate a case.
The pandemic has increased the need for our financial support because we are required to continue to do investigation. We're required to continue to do DNA testing and be creative about how we reach out to witnesses.
Ways that we can try to help our clients to be safe during what is a truly terrifying time to be incarcerated.
By no stretch of the imagination do I think they're going to be adequately cared for. I know they're not. I've seen too many incidents there. People were given them wrong medication and either had serious injury as a result of it or died.
We absolutely need the community to support us in order to be able to continue to do the work that we're doing.
We have to basically depend upon people in society who care enough about each other to support this work.
I think about our clients who are in a pod the size of a tennis court with 130 other men. It's a whole kind of pressure on survival that it's impossible to imagine, but we're going to figure out the best way forward to try to help in any way that we can.
COVID has also had a substantial impact on our ability to raise funds. Our fundraiser that we've had every year, Stand for Innocence, which is a joyous opportunity to be together with colleagues, with exonerees, our exoneree family, and with people in the community. Of course, we didn't have that this year.
And so much of our work of trying to pursue claims of innocence is really on hold because the courts are on hold. Our connection with our clients is very different than it is for your standard defense representation, in the sense that we have a relationship that builds with these individuals over many years, in some cases a decade or more.
To me, it's a family. We are just a family.
Someone from the Innocence Project reached out to my family and invited me to come to an Innocence Network conference. And that was the first time that I ever met other wrongly convicted people. There's something magical about walking into a room full of people that you don't have to explain yourself to.
The sister that knows that girl from Italy, right?
There's an instant connection.
You said that to the wrong person.
My heart races when someone calls me a killer. I shut down when someone dismisses an opinion of mine by just saying that I'm some tabloid trash.
When you first get out, you're not seeing the damage that has happened to you internally and mentally. And people that you love say things to you like, they don't want you around because you're a killer. On a daily basis, sometimes it becomes too much.
In looking at how we vet cases, we'll start gathering police reports, trial transcripts, crime lab reports.
You have to really find new evidence that shows that the outcome of the person's trial would have been different had that evidence been presented.
What we really need, if justice is what our system is really about, is for those who are the ministers of justice to be able to accept that a mistake has been made.
It's not only like we get the DNA and we think, yay, we have an exoneration, and then we get pushback pretty much every step of the way. And it's that pushback that shows that the system's not working.
We see pushback from prosecutors on a lot of different levels, one of which is just even at the stage where we are requesting DNA testing to be done.
For the most part, they have what's called absolute immunity. So no matter what happens, they can't be sued. So it creates a system in which people don't have a motivation to change the system.
25% of DNA exonerations nationally involve a false confession. The risk of falsely confessing is so much more substantial and so much more real for any of us than we'd like to believe is true. And really that comes down to interrogation techniques or the particular psychological pressures that that person may be feeling in the moment that they feel that's their only option.
I mean, what's really scary is that being wrongly convicted happens really fast. It doesn't take much to be wrongly convicted. And once you've been wrongly convicted, it's a mountain to climb to get to the other side.
People may think, somebody would never confess to a crime that they didn't commit unless they were tortured or something like that. But we've learned, actually, the phenomenon of false confessions syncs up perfectly with the way in which American police are trained to interrogate people.
The only thing I have to do on the phone is make sure I'm talking to the right person.
The training itself is designed to get people to move from denial to confession, even if it's not true.
It was 2003 when they came out with the mitochondrial DNA testing, where they only needed skin cells.
DNA technology gets better, gets more precise. We're able to get test results from things that maybe a decade ago we wouldn't have been able to find any DNA results.
We have cases and people who were exonerated. Donovan Allen is a good example, where there was DNA testing done at the time of trial. Everything excluded him. And so the question was, is there new evidence that can be tested which would lead to evidence of his innocence? And in fact, that's what happened.
And my saving grace was the fact that my mother wore turtleneck sweaters and the fact that she was manually strangled. Even after almost 16 years of deterioration, it was just saturated in my cousin's DNA.
What we find, interestingly, is resistance to exculpatory DNA testing results. It's apparent to us that it supports an innocence claim. It's not apparent to the prosecutors, and they come up with wild theories to support their belief that our clients are still guilty despite these exculpatory DNA results.
They don't want to be wrong, or they truly believe that they were right the first time.
A frustration of the work that we're trying to do is that the system already doesn't work the way we say it does on paper in terms of the protections that are supposed to be guaranteed. What we find is that those kinds of witnesses, those incentivized witnesses, are used in the cases with the highest stakes. You know, false testimony by a witness who is given a deal in exchange for their testimony is the leading cause of wrongful conviction in capital cases.
The general public needs to be educated more about what actually goes on in the judicial system and what actually plays a significant role in these decisions that's being made and being handed down.
We need to either ensure consequences for failing to follow the rules. There need to be some sort of repercussions, or we need to reimagine the system by prosecutors where discretion is more limited because of just human bias and fallibility.
I hold out more hope for the Innocence projects than I do for the actual federal public defender's office.
I think oftentimes their intentions are good. They feel like everything else matches, everything else leads to this person. So if this one piece of evidence also, you know, makes it look like there's a possibility of their innocence, they don't want to include it.
When you got the person who the victim is saying did it, saying 2 other people did it, then you got another person saying 2 other people did it.
It allows a prosecutor who believes that this person is guilty to make a calculation about what is the risk of not turning this information over.
I think they took like 2 days to deliberate, maybe a day.
If they do turn it over, then maybe this person they believe to be guilty will not get convicted. And if they don't turn it over and they get caught, that prosecutor is not going to have to worry about professional repercussions. And that's a problem.
They gave me a public defender rap first and was convinced I was guilty. Had never even spoke to me and showed up and was like, "You're in a lot of trouble, man." Like, I'm like, "Dude, I didn't do nothing." He's like, "Yeah, okay, well, I'm trying to get you a deal." I'm like, "A deal for what? I didn't do nothing."
Our criminal justice system is a plea system. 98% of cases resolve by guilty plea. So an entirely innocent person pleads guilty to something they know they didn't do because under our system, that was the wise choice. That's not a choice that any one of us can say we know how we would answer unless we're in that situation. And the truth is, that shouldn't be allowed.
They had to offer me a lot of different plea deals. And it didn't matter how good those plea deals were for me, I wasn't gonna take one. They said, if you take a robbery, you'll get time served and they'll let you out. How do you tell that kid, if you did lose, that you threw away his life and being his father for, what, $1 million? You can't put a price on a child.
Imagine though, if you are on death row, and you've been there for decades, and the prosecutor comes forward and offers you the key to freedom. If you agree to enter not a plea saying I did it, but a plea saying if I went to trial, I would likely be found guilty.
I already had this suspicion that that particular system was corrupt, and once I started seeing things going in a certain direction, yeah, probably going to penitentiary, if not death row.
Do you, while you're on death row, put your faith in a system that's already caused you to be wrongfully convicted and incarcerated and sent to death row? Or do you take that key to freedom and reunite with your family and your community?
So ultimately, when I was found guilty, it just hit me like, these people really want to do everything possible to try to kill you.
The reason that he was in that situation is because the prosecutor was unwilling to acknowledge an error and to really do the right thing and step forward and dismiss the charges. And we support whatever decision our clients or anybody else makes under those impossibly difficult circumstances.
Prison sucks. It's awful. It was designed to torture people and harm people. Nobody wants to go back to prison. And so the state has a coercive power that is unique, and it can leverage that power to force you to make decisions that you wouldn't otherwise make.
It's an awful place for people who've committed crimes. It's an even worse place for people who are innocent, given the years of trauma that they've probably experienced while being in prison. And then they get out and they have a hard time trusting society again. Life is not easy.
It's stressful. You can tear a person apart. It can ruin a person.
The suffering that happens to somebody who's in prison for a crime that he or she did not commit, it's just hard to fathom.
You know, you done went through county for 10 months, you didn't get out. You went to trial, you didn't win. Now you're in prison, you haven't came home. Just years built up of being denied. Yeah, so I think it was just a lot of doubt and then a lot of hurt.
I'm working on a case now where the individual was 22 when he was charged with a crime. And he was charged with a crime in 1981. And that's when I was in law school. And I'm about to retire from my career. Everything that he has missed is what I have had the fortune to experience in my life. To imagine being released from prison when you went in your early 20s and you're now in your 60s, the world is a different place. What you've seen and witnessed in prison has impacted you deeply, and your family has suffered from the loss of not being able to be with you as well.
To me, the true tragedy is when evidence of innocence, that a mistake has been made and a person has spent their life in prison for something they didn't do, and the victim of that case did not get justice. And we have 15 full exonerations at Washington Innocence Project. The system can acknowledge them as actually innocent. And yet of those cases, there's a tiny handful in which the prosecutor actually acknowledges actual innocence. In what world is that justice for that victim to have gone through this horrific experience and then have to relive it through a trial? And then when compelling evidence of their innocence comes forward, to still be given the narrative that we got the right guy the first time is not helping anyone except the prosecutor's ego. There's no competition between the victims of an original crime and a person who was wrongly convicted. Both of those individuals are experiencing an absolutely profound and immeasurable pain. It's hard to make it through life in quarantine. It's hard to make it through life in general for most of us, given just what life has to offer and what life brings on a daily basis. And for those who have been incarcerated for something that they didn't do, there are so many complications that arise simply because of that experience that no system, that no amount of money, that nothing can undo.
We want to continue to be in those people's lives and continue to help them, in whatever way they need, whether it's finding housing or career resources.
Life for anyone coming out of prison is definitely an adjustment, and I feel like there are many more barriers for people as opposed to opportunity for you to get your life back on track.
You can't get no job because the crime that you have behind you couldn't live no life. Even though I'm African American, what so have you, they're always trying to convict you, man. Something gotta be done about the situation.
One of the things I feel like society looks for a lot is that mea culpa, like I was bad and now I'm good. And so for exonerees who get out and try and explain their story and say, no, I was wrongfully convicted, I think a lot of people say, oh yeah, that's what everyone says.
You hear it from everybody. Everybody's innocent in prison. Now I believe there's probably a good majority of people in there that still are fighting for the freedom that were wrongfully convicted.
And so for our clients who really were wrongfully convicted, I think the barriers that they have to successful integration back into society are numerous. And so they're really just trying to hold on until that day comes when they can be compensated for everything that they've gone through.
It's kind of somewhat ironic that our exonerees who were innocent of the crimes, they have less services available to them than if they were just released on probation or parole.
If you've been in prison for a long period of time, they have some things set up to help you get housing and help you integrate back into the society. They don't have anything that I'm aware of set up to do that for wrongfully convicted people.
How to make it through the world without resorting to any of your old habits or bad behavior. To have the pressure of managing who you had to become to survive on the inside and holding that up against the person that everyone expects you to be or everyone wants you to be on the outside.
They're often left completely on their own, and the Washington Innocence Project, our work is to be there for our clients in that situation and to try to get them the type of transition and support that they would need in those moments.
You grow up having faith in the system, and you believe if you didn't do anything that you won't go to prison. We all believe that as long as we're good, we're fine, we won't go to prison. Once you've been arrested and then wrongfully convicted, you never see the world the same way again. You never can feel safe in the world. You never can interact with people the way that you did before you went in. Your life is fundamentally altered.
I am so thankful to my exoneree family because they're so flippin' understanding of what I was going through and getting me adjusted.
Knowing how to navigate the social service system can be really difficult, and I think that's compounded when you're dealing with the post-traumatic stress of having gone through being wrongfully convicted and that battle.
I think it's nothing short of trauma, and many levels of it that our exonerees have to face while they're inside and again when they come out.
Yeah, psychologically you've changed and you're warped, but you don't know it.
Reality clicked back into place. Everything that had turned gray and muted became vibrant again.
You're relieved and you're confused because you don't know what's around the corner and everything's moving so fast.
I felt like my senses were heightened. I could smell things more clearly. I could see things more clearly. I could hear things more clearly.
Decision making alone, no matter what it is, it gets a little confusing sometimes.
It has become more and more clear to us as our exonerated and freed family grows that as an organization, we need to be putting more resources into providing some sort of structure to support our freed and exonerated clients after they're released. The struggle never ends.
I think in a lot of ways, what happened to me was harder for my family than it was for me. Meanwhile, they were, trying to live their lives, but always knowing that something was off.
As far as my kids go, they did not have me for 8.5 years. They're just never gonna get what they could have had, what they should have had, what they deserved. It'll be something simple like folding her clothes out of the dryer, and I have flashbacks to folding other clothes that got taken away from me. It's little things of seeing her do things that are so joyful and at the same time extremely painful. She doesn't even know it. She's just a little baby. But I have to look away and cry sometimes. I don't know if she'll ever understand why.
It's really just kind of about trying to rebuild your own life when it was knocked down by someone else's doing.
A little bit of bickering, but a whole lot of support, just like you would find in a good, supportive family.
Are you serious?
Dead serious.
No one that hasn't experienced it will understand.
I'd love for us to have housing options. I'd love for us to have therapy options. I'd love for us to have access to work training programs, education options, and whatever else is identified by the individuals themselves that they need.
We're in a unique position to see the experience of crime victims and how a failure in the system impacts them. So when I think of the future of Washington Innocence Project, I think of acknowledging every piece of the impact of a wrongful conviction.
Everything that we do is pro bono, and so without donations from people, we can't do our work. If we can't do our work, obviously innocent men and women will die in prison.
Without the generosity of donors and supporters from all over who have supported the work of Washington Innocence Project, most of our clients, freed and exonerated, would still be in prison. Their families would still be without them. They would still be suffering through either the sentence or the fallout of their sentence without knowing that there was a group of people, regardless of anything else, who believed absolutely in their innocence and wanted nothing more than to undo the harm that had been done to them.
I also think about the babies who have been born and brought into the world, who would not exist were it not for the fact that their parents were able to be freed from prison and start their lives again.
We need as many people as we can get to come to a deeper understanding of what happens when a person is wrongfully convicted, how that happens, and what's needed when people are finally exonerated. It is not as simple as they get released from jail.
We lived a life of utter dependency and subordination, and being an adult in the real world and just everything that goes along with that was not something that I was equipped to do.
Know that they have people like the Washington Innocence Project who really do care about people like myself, who really are seriously out there on the front lines advocating for us, fighting for us tooth and nail. That means the world to me.
You know, they're gods to me. You know, I'm very thankful for everything that they've done. I wouldn't be out and be able to enjoy my life if it wasn't for them.
As much as we try to do, there's always more that can be done.
Having been in this work for almost 23 years, the Washington Innocence Project is as strong or stronger than it's ever been.
It would be so helpful for people who are coming out to have a mentor who can just be that person to help them. It's like there are all these things that we have to do every day as people that are so hard to even begin to pick up when you've been sitting in a cell rotting for however long.
So many ideas that come directly from our Washington Innocence Project family. We're so ready and willing to do that with the resources to do it. We know exactly how to help.
Maybe counseling, maybe having some assistance with a transportation, a vehicle, something. You know, a place to stay. You know, because like I said, you know, not everybody that gets out is going to have a family that's going to be able to lend a helping hand, you know, to get them going. And it shouldn't have to be that way anyway.
I was scared. I mean, just to be outside with all the movement, so much movement, and then nobody telling me when and how. So I had to relearn that. And just in that short time, I had to learn how to make those decisions again.
The aftermath of being exonerated, it's not easy when you don't have family members or people that are supporting you in your ways, man. Like it's been all about how I'm gonna survive again.
When people donate to this organization, it's the message that says we care about justice, we care about people who are in Washington prisons for crimes they didn't commit, and it really says that I care about my community.
Support it, big time. Donate. No, those guys are just waiting for a miracle.
To be able to do this work, it takes a lot. So any support goes a long way.
A donation to Washington Innocence Project is really a direct contribution to freeing innocent people, continuing to fight for changes to help prevent wrongful convictions, and helping to support our exonerees going forward.
It's not going to happen soon. There is still so much work to be done, but I'm confident that the Washington Innocence Project has capacity, especially with assistance from the community, to engage in the work that needs to get done.
It's everything.